Hello to everyone who supports this channel and enjoys my content. Warmest greetings to you all the way from sunny South Africa.
Can, for now, the honorable member proceed?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. You see, some of us don't know English properly.
Can
and then
Honorable
we
Matisha?
can only come and say
Honorable
hong,
Matisha?
hong, 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 like that.
Honorable
member.
Matisha.
Yes. Hong, hong, hong.
Honorable Matisha.
Hong, hong,
Honorable
hong.
Matisha.
That's the only thing that she knows.
Honorable Matisha.
Yes. Thank you.
Honorable
Once again, I am here to show you some more retro gaming goodies, as well as share with you some random ass information that is probably utterly useless, but that I personally find pretty cool and fascinating. And since I am an attention-seeking whore who has a constant need for validation, I will share it with anyone and everyone, even if nobody is interested.
It's my beach ball collection. And what you can do here is, I've got about 500 beach balls on here, and this is one of my favorites. I keep it near the door.
Now I'm sure most of you out there recognize both the game and the character I'm showcasing here today, since it is arguably one of the more famous entries in the entire franchise, and most likely the one that put it on the map, and that is Tekken 3, developed by Namco and released in the year 1997 for arcades and the Sony PlayStation 1 console. And for a game released so long ago, it's quite impressive what they were able to achieve in both the graphics and gameplay departments with the limited technology that existed back then in the 90s. One has to wonder why modern AAA developers, with all the advanced technology that exists today, aren't able to do the same. In my recorded footage here, I decided to show off my highly impressive skills playing with Yoshimitsu, who has been a mainstay since the very first Tekken game, as is evidenced by the other video I made featuring him in Tekken 2, about whether or not Yasuke was actually a samurai. Link in the description box below or at the end of the video if you want to go check that one out. Yoshimitsu would also end up being featured in Namco's other flagship fighting game series called Soul Calibur. Now, I'm not sure if the Soul Calibur Yoshimitsu has any ties to the Tekken Yoshimitsu, but what I do know is that in both games, he appears to be some sort of ninja samurai thing, except for Tekken 7. Not sure what was going on with this design.
ここですか。
違うってかゆいのはそこやない。
この上のとこね。
いや違うせやから3本目の上からやらないで。
ここでしょ。
いや違う。
In the lore for either version of this character, one finds out that Yoshimitsu is a member of the Manji clan, a group of ninjas or shinobi who supposedly steal from the rich and give to the poor, especially if said riches are accumulated through corrupt or evil means. It turns out though, at least in Soul Calibur, there isn't one single person who carries the name of Yoshimitsu, but it is rather a title given to a chosen warrior of the clan who has the ability to wield the cursed blade, which it turns out is also called Yoshimitsu. Oh, how f***ing original. But in order to do so, the new potential Yoshimitsu must first slay the previous Yoshimitsu in combat, in order to earn the right to both wield the sword and bear the title. So far regarding Yoshimitsu from the Tekken franchise, it seems that it has been the same individual behind the mask since the very first game. However, in these games he seems to be more of a cyborg, or at least cybernetically enhanced in some way. The most notable augmentation being that of his hand, which he is able to rotate rapidly, allowing him to fly and hover like a helicopter. Yoshimitsu is definitely one of the more bizarre and strange characters of the Tekken franchise. Not so much in Soul Calibur, because I'd argue they already had Voldo since the very first game of the Soul series, and nothing tops a bald guy in a full bondage outfit that utilizes some highly sexualized movements to attack his opponents.
Strut that ass, strut that ass, strut that ass, strut that ass, strut that ass.
But even so, Yoshimitsu is still probably one of the most recognizable characters in both of these Namco-produced fighting game franchises, and is arguably one of the most famous and iconic characters to ever come out of the fighting game genre as a whole, with his weird moves and combos, his wacky but cool armor designs, Tekken 3 being the best in my opinion, and his tales of chivalry, benevolence, and sometimes outlandish badassery that can be seen in each of the many ending cutscenes and story modes present in all the Tekken and Soul Calibur games. But my ever so inquisitive mind got me thinking, is Yoshimitsu actually based on anything or anyone outside of the Tekken and Soul Calibur franchises? Well, you would be surprised to find out that he actually kinda is. And these connections or inspirations can be found in both fiction as well as real-world history. So now that I have your curiosity, and hopefully also your attention, let's jump into this rabbit hole together, shall we?
Gentlemen, you had my curiosity, but now you have my attention.
So to pick a general starting point, it seems like, at least in terms of possible fictional influences on Yoshimitsu's design and overall characterization, there are at least two sources we could take a look at, and both are earlier video games that were developed by Namco back in the 1980s. The first is a 16-bit side-scrolling hack-and-slash arcade game that was developed and released in the year 1986 in Japan, called Genpei Toma Den, which would also get a sequel in 1992 called Samurai Ghost. In both games you play as a character named Taira no Kagekyo, who seemingly provided the inspiration for the overall design of Yoshimitsu, at least in the very first Tekken game and the Soul Calibur games. But it would be in the year 1988 when Namco would release a video game that also had a tie-in promotional film that we would get the more cyber ninja designs of Yoshimitsu in later installments of the Tekken games. Both the movie and the game in question are called Mirai Ninja, or Cyber Ninja in English. In both the film and the arcade game, a man's body and soul are stolen and used as part of a demon's castle. What's left becomes a cyber ninja named Shiranui. The player controls Mirai Ninja, who must fight various enemies and bosses by rapidly throwing shurikens at them and slashing them with his sword at close range. The film, on the other hand, expands on the story a little more. While still featuring the aforementioned Mirai Ninja or Cyborg Ninja, Shiranui, the story follows his involvement in a futuristic war between humans and cyborgs. Shiranui, who is at first one of the elite cyber ninja of the enemy, ends up going rogue and sets out to assist the royal family after their princess is captured and destined to become the final sacrifice needed to summon the evil cyborg legions, digital overlord from another dimension. The resistance army sends a small band of soldiers in, among whom is a determined young warrior out to avenge the death of his brother at the hands of the cyborgs. After suffering many losses and battling towards the enemy castle, it is revealed that the cyber ninja Shiranui, who has been assisting them, is in fact his brother, who supposedly died in an earlier battle, but whose body was taken by the cyborgs and transformed into his current state as a cyber ninja. Now, just by looking at the armor worn by Shiranui or Mirai Ninja in this film, one can clearly see where the concept designed an entire cyborg ninja persona for Yoshimitsu came from, especially from Tekken 2 onwards, and most notably his main design in Tekken 3. So those are the two big examples of where character designers at Namco may have gotten inspiration from for Yoshimitsu, at least in terms of other fictional sources. But did you know that Yoshimitsu may have also been inspired by at least two famous figures that appear in Japanese history, or at least with regards to his name? Now, to be fair, Yoshimitsu is actually a fairly regular Japanese name, and I would imagine that maybe it was more common in the past as well. But in my own personally biased headcanon, which likes to see patterns where there are none, I would like to think that the developers at Namco looked at their nation's samurai and ninja-filled past to find a name that would befit such an iconic character, who just so happens to also be a ninja, a samurai, alien, cyborg, octopus, insect thing. The first example that comes to mind is that of a samurai lord by the name of Minamoto no Yoshimitsu, who was born in the year 1045 AD during the Heian period of medieval Japan. The Heian period is often considered by historians today as a cultural golden age of Japan, and is also the time when we would see the rise of the samurai as a distinctive social and political class within classical Japanese society. It followed directly after the Nara period, when Emperor Kamu, the 50th Emperor of Japan, decided to move the capital from Nara to Heian-kyo, which is today the modern Japanese city of Kyoto. Prior to this though, during the Nara period, Emperor Kamu would also appoint the very first shogun in the year 794 AD, a man named Otomo no Otomaro, whose full military title was Sei Taishogun, which in Old Japanese meant barbarian subduing great general, or general who will pacify the barbarians. The barbarians being the various aboriginal and indigenous tribes that existed in the northern regions of the Japanese islands, such as the Imishi or Ainu people. See, right up until the Heian period, Japan engaged in quite a lot of trade and educational exchange with the regional power, which was Tang Dynasty China, from which Japan gained much of its cultural influence at the time. Though due to rebellion and civil war, trade with the Chinese became increasingly difficult, and so Japan slowly became somewhat isolated, and Japanese culture would start to begin to transform into something more distinct and unique, drifting further from its original Chinese influence. Now, by the time of Minamoto no Yoshimitsu's life, the role of the emperor had by this point already become more of a puppet within Japanese imperial politics, taking on a more symbolic and spiritual role, with real power being in the hands of two competing factions, which were the rising samurai class, who now made up majority of Japan's military and security forces, and the Fujiwara clan, who were a long-standing family of aristocrats that had a history of being affiliated with the imperial family through marital ties, with most of the emperors of the Heian era having mothers from the Fujiwara clan. I will do a much deeper dive into the Heian era and the subsequent Genpei War of 1180 AD, which saw the rise of the samurai as Japan's ruling class in a future video. But for now, to get back on topic, Minamoto no Yoshimitsu would play quite the pivotal role during this time period, along with his powerful samurai family and clan, the Minamoto clan. He was the son of the Heian era Shinjufu shogun Minamoto no Yoriyoshi, and a brother to the famous samurai general and later Shinjufu shogun Minamoto no Yoriyoshi, who led many successful campaigns against other rival clans such as the Abe clan and the Kiyohara clan. Note that the word Shinjufu shogun, meaning commander-in-chief of the defense of the north, would follow after Sei Taishogun, which meant great general who will pacify the barbarians, since by this time most of the so-called barbarian militias of the northern regions of Japan had been brought to heel, though due to the occasional uprising by the Imishi, it meant that sometimes the Shinjufu shogun would have to lead a military campaign against them to crush any attempts at rebellion. According to some historical accounts, such as chronicles within the Daito-ryu history, which is an old samurai martial art founded by Yoshimitsu, after battles he would dissect the corpses of those who were killed in order to understand the inner workings of the human body, and in particular the muscles and joints. He would then use this information to develop his own hand-to-hand combat systems, like the aforementioned Daito-ryu Aiki Jujutsu. which is also known as Takeda Ryu, after his son Minamoto no Yoshikyo, who later took on the name of Takeda, thus making him Takeda Yoshikyo. Aside from inventing his own deadly martial arts style, having quite an esteemed military service record, being the governor of Kai province, and being skilled at both horsemanship and archery, there seems to be quite a number of legends attached to Minamoto no Yoshimitsu as well, which may help us find even greater connections between him, his clan, and the iconic fighting game character. Much like the rest of his family, Minamoto no Yoshimitsu would become immortalized in history through various legends and tales about the Heian period and its eventual collapse during the Genpei War. However, Yoshimitsu himself would not live to see this event, since he died in the year 1127 AD, with the Genpei War only taking place 53 years after his death. But some of his descendants and other clan members would become key figures in this war that would see the samurai class become the dominant military rulers of Japan, such as Minamoto no Yoshitsune and his half-brother Minamoto no Yoritomo. Though neither of them were directly related to Yoshimitsu, but rather just fellow clan members. Minamoto no Yoshimitsu, as well as his brother Minamoto no Yoshiie, as mentioned earlier, have featured quite a lot in Japanese tales and legends, such as in the tale of the Heike, which was a highly exaggerated and fictionalized account of the political struggle between the Fujiwara clan, the Taira clan, and the Minamoto clan over control of Japan during the Genpei War of the 12th century. If you have played the Genji games back on PS2 and PS3, then this story will be quite familiar to you. In this tale, Minamoto no Yoshiie is thought to be the son or avatar of Hachiman, the Japanese god of war in the Shinto religion. After his death, he was elevated to kami or godlike status and renamed Hachimantaro, which means the son of Hachiman. Due to this mythical and divine status, the Minamoto clan eventually made him their patron ancestral kami or deity, and has since been worshipped as a god of victory. As for Minamoto no Yoshimitsu, one of the legends about him was that he was appointed as Kai no Kami for his military achievements in the Gosanen War of 1083 AD. And even though the word kami in Japanese usually refers to a deity or divine being, like a god or goddess, in this case the title translated to guardian or governor of Kai province, and at least based on the information I found online, was more connected to a specific rank within the samurai political hierarchy. There also seems to be quite the connection between Minamoto no Yoshimitsu and Japanese Zen Buddhism, since again, according to local legends, he would in his later years train his mind and body extensively at the Onjoji Esoteric Buddhist Training Hall under the name of Oyabu Niudo, and is said to have mastered invincible supernatural powers and divine inspiration, which would later on allegedly assist in his development of the Daito-ryu martial arts system. Aside from chopping up dead bodies, as I had mentioned earlier, there's also another Buddhist legend of Minamoto no Yoshimitsu having showed great devotion to the 11-headed Japanese bodhisattva Yoroido Kannon, a bodhisattva within Buddhism being a spiritual individual who prolongs their ascent to full enlightenment and Buddhahood out of compassion for those who suffer, thus instead allowing themselves to constantly be reborn through the cycle of reincarnation that they may continue to carry out acts of kindness and goodwill to others. The relation with the Kannon Bodhisattva and Minamoto no Yoshimitsu, also known by his Buddhist name as Shinra Saburo Yoshimitsu, is told in a famous legend dating back to the Heian period. In the legend, it states that when Yoshimitsu's brother Yoshiie was at a disadvantage during the Oshu War of 1052 AD, he took an effigy or statuette of this Kannon Bodhisattva with him to go and reinforce his brother's army, and it is said that a strange and fierce general appeared and defended Yoshimitsu in the heat of the battle. Why I personally found this quite interesting is because aside from sharing a name, the character of Yoshimitsu from the Tekken and Soul Calibur games is often quoted as uttering Buddhist chants and mantras during his victory sequences, such as in some of the Soul Calibur games he would chant Namu Namu Namu, which is a Japanese pronunciation of the Sanskrit word namas, and is often chanted by Buddhists to show their devotion to the Buddha's teachings and the path to enlightenment. He is also sometimes shown as saying Shiki Zoku Zeku, which translates to form is emptiness.
You win.
However, either due to hardware restraints on older console systems or just pure laziness, the quote itself is half finished, with the full quote being Shiki Soku Zeku, Kusoku Ze Shiki. Now, I don't know if the developers at Namco took inspiration from the real-life Minamoto no Yoshimitsu and his connection to Japanese Buddhism for these little hints of Buddhist chanting whenever Yoshimitsu wins a fight in either Tekken or Soul Calibur, but since this is my personal headcanon, it must be true, at least to me.
I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Now I know that this video is already quite long, but please bear with me for a little more, as there's one more historical figure I would like to take a look at for where the dev team at Namco may have gotten inspiration from for the character of Yoshimitsu, and that would be from the 14th century shogun Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, who was the military ruler of the Ashikaga shogunate during what is today known as the Muromachi period of Japan. He was born in the year 1358 AD and would eventually rise to this powerful political and military position after the death of his father, who was the previous shogun Ashikaga Yoshiakira, since the two other potential heirs to the shogunate, namely his older brothers, passed away. So even though he was Yoshiakira's third son, he was the oldest surviving one, thus making him next in line to become the shogun of feudal Japan. Now at this time, Japan was somewhat divided politically, or at least in terms of the imperial office and divine authority of the emperor, since somehow, some way, there ended up being two imperial lines existing within the nation of Japan during the Muromachi period of the 1300s. They were known as the Northern and Southern courts, with each side claiming to represent the true emperor. It was thanks to Ashikaga Yoshimitsu that this bitter and petty rivalry came to an end when he negotiated the reconciliation of the northern and southern courts through a teeny bit of violence and warfare, bringing them both kicking and screaming under the rule of Emperor Go-Komatsu in the year 1392. Even though he retired in 1395, he still maintained all of his political and governing power, and even received imperial envoys from both China and Korea on at least several occasions, leading to a solid trade agreement between the three nations that would last for well over the next century, with the same envoys dubbing him as Nihon Kukuo, or King of Japan. In 1407, he set into motion a plan to become Daijo Tenno, a title customarily applied to a retired emperor, although unrealized due to his sudden death in the following year of 1408. This last venture was particularly audacious because Yoshimitsu never actually sat on the Japanese imperial throne as an emperor, so clearly the man thought pretty highly of himself. Later in his career, it appears that Ashikaga Yoshimitsu sought to legitimize his transcendent and divine authority through the idiom of Buddhist kingship, deploying ritual, symbols, and monumentalism to cast him as a universal monarch or Dharma king, not unlike his counterparts in other countries in Southeast Asia. Ashikaga Yoshimitsu was also instrumental in kickstarting the very popular Japanese tradition of no theater, which exists in Japan to this very day, since he was quite the fan of the famous historical Japanese playwright and stage actor Zayami Motokyo, who is often considered as the founder of no theater by Japanese historians. There is also evidence to suggest that the two were engaged in a homosexual relationship as well, and that Ashikaga Yoshimitsu was Zayami Motokyo's lover as well as his patron, often donating large sums of money to his theater group and funding his plays. So that is at least yet another connection to the iconic fighting game character of Yoshimitsu from Namco's two popular video game franchises, since Yoshimitsu in both Tekken and Soul Calibur can sometimes be seen doing short no theater-like performances or poses in his victory and introduction sequences, not to mention the very blatant appearance of no theater masks resembling a Japanese demon or Oni in his various costume designs across the many installments of both franchises. Just a small correction that I only realized after having already recorded the voiceover for this video is that while Yoshimitsu does wear a No-inspired Oni mask, the victory poses he sometimes does at the end of a match are from Kabuki theater. The main difference being that Kabuki is usually more energetic and over the top in comparison to No theater, which is slower and far more elegant. In Kabuki, the actors also do not wear masks, but instead use face paint, whereas in No theater, the use of masks is far more common. There is also the fact that at least in Soul Calibur, he also wears a small flag on his back with the symbol of the Manji clan. This was quite a common thing for samurai to do in order to signify which clan they represented on the battlefield. There is a connection to be drawn here as well with Minamoto no Yoshimitsu, since one of the legends involves him handing the proud banner or flag of the Minamoto clan to his son Yoshikyo, who would later go on to found the Takeda clan, changing his last name from Minamoto to Takeda when he relocated to live out the rest of his days in Takeda village located in Kai province, the same region which was under the protection and governance of his father Minamoto no Yoshimitsu himself when he was installed as its samurai lord and governor. Since they inherited the flag from the Minamoto clan, the Takeda clan would continue to pass it down together with the sacred Minamoto armor from generation to generation, as well as continuing the legacy and development of Daito Ryu martial arts, first created by Minamoto no Yoshimitsu himself. So just like the Takeda clan wearing the Minamoto clan's banner and symbol on their flags each time they charged into battle, so too would Yoshimitsu in Soul Calibur wear the symbol of his clan, the Manji clan, in each installment of the popular fighting game series. Not to mention that Yoshimitsu also practices his very own martial arts style called Manji Clan Ninjutsu, which, just like the real-life Daito Ryu style invented by the first historical Yoshimitsu, is passed down from generation to generation and includes the Manji ninja disguising themselves as samurai, which could explain why video game Yoshimitsu always seems to wear the armor, regalia and weapons of a samurai, despite actually being a ninja or shinobi. But anyway, as mentioned before, I don't know if these two historical figures actually served as inspiration for the character of Yoshimitsu in the Tekken and Soul Calibur games, since it was never actually stated by Namco's development team. However, as always, it is fun to speculate, and we can definitely say for sure that they did seem to take some inspiration from previous Namco titles like Mirai Ninja and Genpei Tomaden, when designing what would become one of the most iconic and famous characters of the fighting game genre. Well, that brings us to the end of yet another episode of the 8-Bit Academic. If you liked this video, I would very much appreciate it if you hit that like button and left a comment down below sharing your thoughts and opinions, or maybe even suggestions for future videos or video games you would like for me to cover. And if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing to my channel, as I will be uploading new videos every Friday featuring retro and classic video games from past decades, as well as a wide variety of topics that I find interesting, be it history, entertainment media like film, comics or anime, science, technological development, conspiracies, aliens, mythology and so much more. Thank you once again for watching, and I will see you all next time.